They
We're in
are.
the middle of the Microsoft storm as well, right? Right now, first they said they patched it, then they had to fix the patch, then they claimed they were on top of all the activity. Soon we will reach the Hafnium stage of, well, if you just get off on prem and upgrade to cloud
SharePoint
SharePoint,
Cloud.
then you're good, right? And we're almost at the end of the Microsoft marketing
Juanito, you're
strategy.
joking about this, but this is like
What else am I gonna do?
yeah, this is I mean, it brings me back. Gosh, it brings me back to my just lack of confidence in anything security related coming out of Microsoft. Even though they own the messaging that they have the best security team, we know a bunch of people there at Microsoft who are like premium people there. But at the same time, we continue to get the ProPublica piece of the digital Chinese escorts in China, like having access to U.S. Department of Defense data, and Microsoft aware of it, but for business purposes, they moved ahead. We got this faulty patching nightmare. We got Hi-Fi Lee on Twitter constantly complaining about trying to report Microsoft Office vulns to the MSRC and giving him, like, throwing all the onus on
Yeah.
him to reproduce it. It just feels like, and this is all in the midst of a Secure Futures initiative that is, we got 25 deputy CISOs now. Everything is under control. We're on top of things. And then constantly, week after week after week, you and I, we're on this podcast. Others are discussing this kind of thing. There's a larger issue here around just trusting Microsoft to get any of this right. They've had SharePoint for 25 years. They've had an MSRC and a security program, a prominent security program for all these years. Is this something that you just can't get on top of? Am I being unfair to Microsoft?
No, I don't think you're being unfair to Microsoft. I'm sure Microsoft would say otherwise, but you just touched on a series of points, and I think they're all important and they're all very valid. But I'd like to separate sort of like Microsoft's executives' approach to security and the decisions that get made at that level from MSRC and what's happening at MSRC and like their management of vulnerabilities. For the MSRC one, I would point everybody to Ryan Naraine's keynote at Echo Party, I want to say 2 or 4 years ago, 2 years ago, that addresses some of the evolution at MSRC and some of the changes. And I think it is really notable. It's not just to toot Ryan's horn because he will never tell you. He probably won't even put the link in the description. But it was a really good way of like approaching sort of this idea of like, look at how things have evolved at Microsoft as far as security goes. And it's notable to look at how essentially Microsoft was the pioneer, particularly under the Katie Masuris days, of approaching vulnerabilities in a better way, approaching vuln developers and vulnerability researchers as human beings and collaborators, and kind of embracing the notion, right? You create the bug bounties, you try to get ahead of certain incentive structures, and a big part of that was, okay, we're going to ask people for all these vulns. How are we going to get ahead of them? How are we going to fix them? How do you do? There's a relationship management element to it, which is not easy, right? Like vuln researchers, like the rest of us in the security space, are particular creatures. Maybe they're even more particular in some cases than others. But the bigger problem here is actually that validating vulnerabilities is hard work. It's something that we talked about in particularly when we were talking about the NVD, the National Vulnerability Database, and like what's going to happen there, and why don't other people do it, and why doesn't government just keep footing the bill on this one? It is really hard work to validate vulns. It's slightly easier when they're scoped down to your company, but you're still talking about a certain amount of setup and all these things that have to go into replicating these things. So there's all this work that had to go into building up MSRC. And sort of building up the right culture to make it work, the right set of incentives. And then what you see is, I think there's an era. I don't know the years. I don't know. I don't know how to time it because it really wasn't my time. But there's an era where MSRC gets its shit very together, and people seem very happy, at least to some degree, with their ability to like send stuff to Microsoft and get things patched. And we were getting all these like great events at Black Hat where like you could see the community had developed around Microsoft's approach to security. And then there's a backslide. Am
All
I
right,
wrong, Ryan? Like, I feel I'm
I'll
not
give
saying
you
that's where we're at now. I'm just saying like there was a time when shit looked decent at Microsoft.
when they threw marketing dollars behind an influence campaign. My argument that in the Echo Party keynote was that none of this changed. They had put a nice sheen on it. They had put
Right.
lipstick on the pig. But over the years, we've seen these examples of these faulty things. They were constantly complaining about people going public with vulnerabilities, even at that time.
Yeah.
Like even at the time when Katie Masouris and all our friends were like active in the industry and Microsoft was sponsoring conferences, and you kind of felt that they were like the
They're
trendsetter in
still
security and how
Microsoft.
things were going to be done. They were
Right.
still Microsoft. There was still
Right.
bullshit happening. They were still fighting with people. I used in the keynote the example of, Cesar Cerudo and some of the
Yeah.
old guys from core security in Argentina and what they had to deal with. Even during that time, there were a lot of
Yeah.
threats. There was a lot of budget uh, 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 decisions made where certain companies didn't get contracts because they were too critical, like all of that stuff. So I'm just putting it into context that yes, you're right.
Yeah.
But a lot of that was just money sheen thrown on it. Like Katie Masouris will
Look,
tell you, all of that stuff was funded by their marketing budget. It was all marketing output to be part of this community type, MSRC type thing. All of that fell apart over the years. But anyway, go ahead.
no, I look, I defer to you and of course to Katie completely on that. And I never got the sense that things were great, right? That they had cracked it. But I got the sense that MSRC improved to a point where they were better than they are today. And I think that's the big point is
And they were better than the rest. So I think because
Yeah.
the rest was so terrible that
Yeah.
Microsoft doing any sort of like pre-advisories instead, like pre-patch advisories, for instance, so some of the innovative things they did in the early days
Yeah.
had to be followed by the Oracles and the other vendors. So you give them
I-
credit for like trend setting
Yeah.
some of that stuff. But at the same time, this is the world's biggest company with the most resources.
I think this is an area where I admonish us as part of the security industry in that we tend to be, I think, too critical when we look at somebody like Microsoft didn't stumble into being better than the rest. People worked very hard, like Katie, to force Microsoft to act less shitty.
True.
And yeah, they didn't nail it, as in they didn't figure everything out. They didn't get their every executive out of their own way. They didn't somehow change the culture forever, but they clearly improved. And I think it's really important to note when people improve, whether it's for marketing, whether it's wherever the dollars come from, because now they're backsliding and they have backslid a lot. So that time of improvement is something A, to yearn for, B, clearly not a permanent state. It wasn't something that like, oh, we've reached improvement, we will never move backwards, right? Like that's a mistake we tend to make in the tech sector, because we seem to think that development is about improvement, is basically about discovery of the furthest possible extension of what we know and can do. And surely it's just a matter of discovering a better way to do things that's keeping us from improving. And that's completely false. And you can see it in the security space most of all. There were better security solutions for certain things 10 years ago than there are today. So that notion that we're just like that products and the security industry are always operating at the forefront of what technology allows is simply false. That's a lie we've told ourselves. And similarly in security, I don't know how much, if any of this had anything to do with technological development. It had a lot to do with culture. And what's obvious is the hackers came into Microsoft and they raged and did their best to improve this fucking Soviet bureaucracy. And the hackers are now gone for the most part, and it seems like the culture is settling right back into to being very comfortable with a lot of shitty bullshit practices that keep blowing up in their faces. And
Yeah.
I'm glad they're at least blowing up in their faces, but I am really disturbed because this isn't like the revelation that MSRC is in a shit place. we've been talking about this for years now, for literally years of like, hey, really good vuln researchers that are known, that have worked with Microsoft before, say that they can't get vulns patched by Microsoft. We're getting all these broken patches from Microsoft. You know, we're having a really hard time getting any semblance of accountability or sharing for certain types of threats. There have been times when it has become evident that Mystic has visibility, for example, into a bunch of PSOAs that nobody else was seeing. They didn't share with anybody else, and when, you know, folks started to figure it out, they stonewalled it. So there's a lot of ways in which you look at the culture at Microsoft, which is, to me, that has nothing to do with whether people are doing their work and like really want to work or not. This has to do with the leadership and what the leadership allows. And it's clear that the leadership has no appreciation for the intrinsic value of security as a practice, and seems to have come to some very interesting choices about what their investments are worth and what matters in the security space.
And constantly trotting out updates to their secure futures initiative that everything is hunky-dory and we're hitting all our targets and we're right. I remind people that the secure future initiative at Microsoft was born out of a CSRB report that skewered this culture that you're talking about, like completely skewered them. They responded by saying, okay, we're going to restructure. We bring in a new CISO. We'll have a bunch of deputy CISOs and we'll do this. We'll add some cloud things we'll add, and they've been updating, saying, but in the meantime, in the background, all this shit keeps popping up again. Shout out to ProPublica, because I feel like there's no real journalism happening in this space, and those guys are like among the few that's happening. Just to circle back, Costin, do we know anything about victimology here? Like, who are the targets? Who are the victims? What do we know?
So from what I've seen from the public blogs, and by the way, I was thinking that at this point, if you're a security company and you don't have a blog on this, you're probably falling behind. So I think pretty much all the big security companies should have some sorts of blog on this, talking about their visibility, about the victims, and I think very important, their recommendations.
Which is the best one you saw?
The best blog, or you mean the best?
Out of the security vendors, who deserves some credit for like the way they?
Obviously, the one from SentinelOne is unique in a way, because they talk about this
You're
group.
sucking up to him.
No, thank you guys, thank you so much.
No, seriously, because like nobody else talks about the group who exploited this on the 17th without files in memory, like super high-end, super stealthy. Everyone else talks about 18s plus. So yeah, the SentinelOne, definitely take a look at that. Fantastic research. I like the Boris Larin's research, and also ESET. I think they published an interesting blog.
I haven't seen the ESET one.
Wait a second. Boris Larin is our old friend from Kaspersky Great Team. Let's give the guys a credit. And they have a new blog up on Secure List about ToolShell, explaining it. And he also makes the point there very, very clearly that this thing has a long tail coming. Very, very easy to exploit. Complete takeover of the server. Costin mentioned the key stuff. The fact that these things are very, very slow to patch. Vendors are companies are very, very slow to patch. So there's going to be a long tail of this thing there. Sorry, go ahead on the ESET.
Yeah. ESET, I also think they have an interesting blog with some good IOCs in there. So overall, if you read everything that is available, I think the victimology obviously depends on everyone's visibility. So the US for sure, but then, for instance, Kaspersky talks about victims in Russia, victims in Africa as well. So I think it depends on everyone's visibility, but in the end, you can expect to be very closely related to who is running these SharePoint servers on the internet. So that would be either big corporations, I think that's a top target, and potentially governments, small, medium businesses probably as well. And that should be probably across all the sectors out there.